Welcome to Real Conversations with Patricia Baranovsky-Schneider, the podcast that takes you on a journey around the world to meet some of the most inspiring and accomplished individuals. Discover their stories, uncover invaluable business lessons from their paths to success, and gain exclusive insights on how to apply their strategies to elevate your life and business.
I'm your host, Patty Baranovsky-Schneider. Today, I'm joined by Wendy Alexander, a career coach specializing in helping midlife professionals and menopausal women land their dream job. So welcome, Wendy. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Wendy Alexander, and I'm the founder and principal writer and coach at Happy Career Hub, is the name of my company. I do work mostly with mid-level career professionals and particularly midlife women wanting to go through that change. It is a time when there's a lot of change in our lives. And so the business started for me years ago when I was going through a breakup and I was pregnant at the time, trying to recreate life and find a career that was going to pay well for me to raise my daughter. But it became very much a part-time business because I actually landed a really great role in corporate. And I was in corporate in a reasonably high-powered role for about 23 years. And so my coaching business was something I did on the side.
Okay.
But when I went through the big change, midlife, menopause, and all of its challenges, that was when I decided to do the business full-time, because the stress of corporate became too much for me. And I was also discontented in corporate. So it was a perfect storm for me to make the change.
Very nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Now, your journey, it's incredibly inspiring. So can you share what motivated you to transition from corporate hiring manager to midlife career coach?
Well, as I said, it was mostly motivated by the actual midlife change myself. I had been coaching probably, I'd say, 10% of my time up until then, because I was still full-time in corporate and I was in roles that were fairly high-powered. I was managing budgets of $200-300 million, delivering huge programs of work, managing people to deliver these programs of work. And I largely enjoyed the job, especially the people management side of things. I was working in information technology, project management. I didn't particularly enjoy that side of it. I'm not, I love technology for what it does for us, but it's nothing that really inspires me. The people side of it inspired me, and I enjoyed managing the people. I enjoyed helping them drive their careers forward. And then midlife came, menopause came quite early for me. So I was expecting it to happen in my 50s. It came at age 45.
Wow.
So I was quite unprepared for it. And I was one of those women who probably had all the symptoms, the foggy brain, the insomnia, the hot flashes, the feeling unwell.
Right.
And then alongside that, I had already been questioning if I wanted to continue forward in my career.
Right.
So I suppose that collision of the two things going on in my life led to me going, I think maybe I need to reevaluate.
Right.
And so I started a little process. I just took myself through one of my actual processes that I use to help people. I took myself through it and said, okay, identify what you're really good at, what you really love, and what is going to make you want to get up on Monday mornings, right? Because at that stage, I was like, I'm not inspired anymore,
I get it.
And so that was really the catalyst that made me make the shift. Now, it wasn't a quick shift. I knew that I wanted to make the shift, and I started to slowly plan it over a couple of years.
Okay.
Because one of the things I don't advise people to do is to make a radical change when they haven't stabilized their finances.
Right.
Because you can put yourself under a lot more stress trying to make changes, and you haven't secured your finances, or you haven't got financial backing, or you haven't saved enough money. So I never encourage people. I'm a very practical gal. So for me, it's like feet on the ground and let's plan it and do it over a period so that you're not shell-shocked,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And that's what
makes
I did for
sense.
myself. And yeah,
Oh, good
and
stuff.
I'm here now, 5 years later, still
Wow.
doing what I love doing.
Nice. Now, you've faced significant adversity, from surviving domestic violence to overcoming health issues. So how have these experiences shaped your approach to coaching?
Well, for me, one of the things I learned was that I think it was drummed into me by my father growing up in South Africa in apartheid, which was a difficult environment to grow up in. We were always told from very young by my father to never become victims of life. So Dad sort of really drummed that into us. He goes, yes, you in difficult circumstances. Yes, you've got many cards stacked against you. However, you can either decide to be a victor of your life or become a victim of your life. So which one is it? And my father was always shaping us. There was not a lot of excuses we could give him for why we didn't perform well. So I think the foundation, the grounding was really strong. But also, one of the things I learned was that I could walk forward with one step at a time. So I'm not someone that has ever made wide sweeping changes. I always do it methodically and one little step at a time, taking actions daily.
Smart way.
Because I've never seen the sweeping gestures or the sweeping steps actually lead to success. I've seen them overwhelm people. And so my method of coaching is we go one step forward at a time. Right. Now, maybe it might take longer than you like, but you're going to have your foundations pretty strong, and then your success is going to be solid. Right. Because I don't like people to become overwhelmed. I always try to avoid being, now there are times when you will be overwhelmed, but then you pause. For me, I always pause and go, okay, what's the next best step I can take? Just one, not the 10 that I'm supposed to take.
Right.
What's the next best one that I can take? So that's
baby
really the strategy, baby steps.
Yeah, good stuff. So now, what do you believe is the most common mistake people make when transitioning to a new career in midlife?
People don't do the foundational pieces I've seen. So sometimes people get frustrated and overwhelmed with their careers. They're not going forward. They're not getting the promotions they want, or they've been in the job for too long and they're bored. And then they want to make very radical changes without looking at the foundation pieces. And for me, the foundation pieces is always comes down to identifying the patterns of what brings you a level of joy. Now, we're not going to have overall joy in every little thing that we do in our workplace. That's just unrealistic. Mm-hmm. But we all have talents that when we're doing certain things, we're natural at it. People come to us for advice around it. So I always help people identify those patterns. And then I also tell people, have a look at what you've overcome in life, because therein lies certain nuggets, gold nuggets of what you could potentially extract from your story and that you can shape to sell someone else. And then again, back to the baby steps. Mm-hmm. Take one step at a time, plan it out properly, work with a coach or work with someone that can hold you accountable, because accountability is also very important. It's important to, a lot of people go, I want this career change, or I want to transition into a job that I really love, but they want to overlook some of the important steps. Right. And then what happens? They go into a role and it doesn't turn out to be what they want, or they haven't properly planned for it. And then within a year, 2 years, they're back in dissatisfaction mode. And so for me, it's about being practical, not having the heads too much in the clouds, and implementing little strategies that's going to last. Right. So don't rush through it, because I've seen a lot of people, when they're dissatisfied, they want to rush through everything. Right. And they end up 2 years later in the same, they come back. I've had clients come back 2 years later because they haven't followed the advice, or they've tried to rush through it too quickly, or they haven't thought it out or planned it out, or worked out how they're going to go step forward and sell their skills to someone. And people also settle, sometimes, if they haven't planned well, especially if they haven't planned their finances well, desperation sets in because they don't get a role quickly, and then they settle for something. And the moment you settle, you end up settling for what you had before. Right? So I've seen that. My recommendation to people is slow down, think it through, and plan it out properly.
And I agree that having someone guide you, because we're our own worst enemies and we don't always see what we're doing. So having someone, on the outside looking in can say, I don't even know if you're aware that this is what you're doing. Because sometimes you don't even know, So I think having an outside person to help you, and sometimes they're going to tell you things you don't want to hear, but it's necessary. It's like, do you realize that you keep making the same? Because I've had people do that to me with I was in abusive relationships back to back, and everybody's like, do you realize that you keep falling for the same exact type? And I'm like, am I? I don't see it, but it's,
Yes.
You need that, which is great. So
and I think with career, people need to go to experts, I think, because the family and friends are always going to tell you what you want to hear. Right. But you need someone who can, especially when you're trying to drive forward in your career and you're trying to go for better roles, better money, all of that. There's certain things you need to do and certain things you need not do,
right.
That can count against you. And so you need someone who can actually objectively say to you, listen, here's where I see you repeating a pattern. Here's where, like when I do interview coaching with people, they telling their answers, and some of them are speaking, for example, for 5 minutes on an answer. I'm like, that's too long.
Yeah.
2 minutes.
Right.
Practice and help them form a succinct answer that's going to be impactful. Because you need to always remember your audience. Your audience, when you're going for new roles, is a very busy hiring person.
Yeah.
So be aware that they're very busy, that they need you to give the answer in a short, compelling statement rather than, War and Peace story or something.
Right. No, I agree 100%. Now, you mentioned the secret language that successful candidates use in their resume and interviews. So can you elaborate on what this is and how others can learn from it?
So secret language comes back to being more achievements focused than tasks and responsibilities focused. So most resumes, and I still see them today, even in this current market, people want to tell you everything about them. So their resumes are too long, number one.
Right.
And then they become very, very focused on zooming in onto all the tasks, all the responsibilities. And sometimes it can be because they want to convince someone that they're good at what they do.
Right.
But most people want to see evidence. So it's about show me, rather than tell me your long list of responsibilities, show me how you contributed in a company. And so what you need to do is zone in on probably only a handful of significant achievements that you've had in the role, and then use active language. So here's the language side of it. Use the active language because it's pacey and it's easier to read, but a lot of people write in inactive language. And so when someone's reading it, the sentences are too long. They're using words that don't jump up at people, And so for me, for example, some person might say, I'm going to give an example of achievements focused with some active language, and they can say, help the team improve, something like that. Well, okay, that is a reasonable achievement, but it's not something that pops. So if you start to give some metrics and some numbers around it and use some active language, you can say, turned around a struggling team. Okay, that's already someone's buy. How did you do it? You introduced one-to-one meetings. You had rewards recognition programs. You helped develop their training. That's 3 little examples of how you turn them around. And you can put that in a sentence that's quite sharp and succinct. Right? And so suddenly now the recruiter or the hiring person is saying, oh, it was a struggling team. They uplifted their team. And if you've got a percentage, you can say, which increased productivity by 30%. Now you've got numbers to back up the achievement. Plus you've got 3 little examples, all written in active language.
Right. That's good stuff.
That's far more inspiring to a reader than a long-winded sentence that's about tasks and responsibilities that doesn't tell them anything about how you did what you did and how you actually achieved.
Yeah.
So the language needs to be active language. You need to be zoned in on achievements rather than on tasks and responsibilities. And if you can back up an achievement with a metric or a number, like a percentage increase or a revenue number, then you have strong bullet points.
Yeah.
People will take it, and it jumps, it pops off the page, right?
Yeah, for sure. Now tell us, as a woman of color who grew up during apartheid in South Africa, how did these experiences influence your perspective on career success and resilience?
Well, as I said, we were told from very young, Dad was like, so in South Africa, I'll just explain quickly what apartheid was. It was a segregation by race. So, there was a black population, colored population, which is what I'm classified as on my birth certificate, and white population. And you lived in separate neighborhoods. You couldn't go on the same trains. You couldn't go to the same cinemas, beaches, all of that type of thing. So probably a lot like the civil rights movement in the South of America, back in those days in the 60s. So it was very much like that, but it was obviously in modern times because apartheid only ended in 1994 when Mandela became the Prime Minister of South Africa. But all those years, there was, 40-something years of apartheid. And so we didn't have access to some of the best schools. We couldn't afford to go to university, a lot of us. I got into university on a scholarship, for example. So it was all of these cards stacked against you. And Dad was always drumming into our brains. If you want to succeed in life, you're going to have to work twice as hard. This is what's expected of you. Yes, it's not fair. Like my father was just like, I know it's not fair, and you can cry about it not being fair, or you can do life and be successful and put in the extra effort. So I think the fact that was taught to me from young helped me and built the resilience muscle. I was never one to give up easily, and probably not allowed to give up easily too, I would say. When you have parents who don't really tolerate excuses, they helped us as much as they could. They encouraged us. And when we did feel dejected, they'd give you the hug, hold you, but then they'd move you forward again. Like you weren't allowed to sit on the pity potty for too long, right? And so that in itself built the resilience. And then, of course, going through life there and seeing it and just keep moving forward and pushing through despite the circumstances. It set me up for the ability to always push through. But the big mantra was I didn't want to become a victim of life. That I learned from a young kid with my parents showing us and telling us how to move forward. And so by the time I came through Australia and had gone through the breakup, and that difficult relationship and all of that, I had that instilled in me already. I was like, I'm not going to let life beat me down. Now, yes, I'm crying in the corner right now, and I can cry for today and tomorrow. I call it doona diving. I doona dived for a while. Doona over the head, don't want to know, but eventually you got to poke your head out from under the doona.
Right.
And you got to keep moving forward.
Yeah. It was almost like what your parents, what they're instilling you is a gift they didn't even know they were, or a gift you didn't even know you were getting. So I think that was great.
No, because obviously when you're a kid and you're feeling bad or you're going through situations, you want them to kind of smother you with love and kindness. You don't want to hear all the you sort of want them to indulge you a bit, but they were never short of compassion. But they never let us stay in that victimhood bucket at all. Like it was like you're there for today and maybe you're there for tomorrow, but after that, you got to come out and you got to move forward. So I do thank them now for that, even though at the time I was like, they mean parents.
My parents, I remember, back in the day going to school, my mom, she was a single mom. So she would give me clothes, but I would have like the cheapy no-name clothes, cheapy no-name Steve. She's like, I put clothes on your back and food on the table. You want fancy name stuff? Get a job and get it yourself. And the same thing, I'm going to high school getting picked on, and it's like, oh, how mean are they? I hate these guys. I don't ever want to live, But now you taught me, you work hard for what you want in life. So that was like the greatest gift that I got that I didn't know I was getting at the time. I hated them at the time, but it's like, wow, you instilled, so all these things, kids, pay attention. It's not because they're being mean. They have reasons for it.
That's right. It builds your resilience, and you also need to learn to define yourself without all the fancy labels and things like that. You've got to know who you are and the strength that you hold within yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
Outside of all those external, empress clothes, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. So
Well,
I'm very fortunate. I have a lot of time for my parents now. I spend a lot of time with them. I still have them. I'm very fortunate because I have friends whose parents have passed on.
Right.
Mine are still with me in their 80s, and I absolutely value what they taught me. We laugh about it now,
Of course. Now, this next topic I could relate to. So what are some of the unique challenges that menopausal women face in the workforce, and how do you help them navigate the challenges?
So the first thing I think with menopausal women is that, especially now, look, I think the conversations are starting to be had in workplaces, but I don't think it's anywhere near where it could be. So we challenged in that we sometimes living and suffering in silence. The body goes through a lot of change, the brain, the emotions, everything goes through a lot of change, and sometimes we're in high pressure jobs. Sometimes we're in jobs that we don't like anymore, that no longer fit for purpose. They don't suit what we're looking for in life. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to navigate very difficult physical, emotional, spiritual symptoms. And we're trying to navigate it alone. Mm-hmm. Because unfortunately, women are still viewed as overly emotional. So if you come and bring all of that to the workplace, you're struggling, you're not sleeping, all of these things, there's not many people you can talk to about it. And most of the top positions are still filled by men. And some men are great. I had guys who were great in terms of supporting me and helping me. But the thing with a lot of the guys is they get very skittish around women's business. Right. And so, because I remember, there would be, when I was younger, there would be young females come and, some of them suffered through their periods really badly and they needed a day off for the first day. Or they'd come and talk to me. They wouldn't talk to the big bosses because they just felt embarrassed about talking to a guy about it. And also guys would just literally stiffen up the minute you mention periods. Right. So it's similar with menopause. The minute you mention that, they stiffen up, they shifting awkwardly. And so in the end, it's about trying to have the conversations. And so one of the ways I help women is to help them have those conversations with HR departments. Mm-hmm. Like, you need to start talking but speak in a way that isn't going to make people feel uncomfortable. Or sometimes just acknowledge the elephant in the room. Right. Like some of the women I've helped have the conversations, I've said to them, okay, your HR person is a male. I said, so you go in there and you say, listen, I know this is an awkward conversation, and I'm sure you're going to be shifting awkwardly. Like, just acknowledge it and say, but here's what's happening for us midlife women. Right. And this is the kind of support that we need. Because the world has changed, especially since the pandemic. The world has changed. You can work hybrid environments. You can work from home. So when you're having a bad day, you can potentially request to work from home that day. Because if you need to rest, you can go and take an hour's rest or whatever. I said, so you need to be the person, but we have to advocate for ourselves because they don't know what we're going through. And if you just walk around and you become angry and resentful, without informing people, and this applies to our personal relationships as well, right, then you can't really hold them accountable for that. If we're not communicating, if we're not the one advocating for ourselves or championing our own causes, then it's unfair to expect someone to just know how to help you. It comes down to asking for help. And what I've seen is that when you ask with sincerity and with authenticity, I've not seen too many people turn people away,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so what I really help women to do is to negotiate within the workforce
Right.
for what they need in terms of support.
That's
The other piece is I have to do a fair bit of work with women around that imposter syndrome. Women more than men suffer from it. Never recognizing the talents that they have, or feeling like what they have to contribute isn't good enough.
Mhm.
And so that is a big piece that we have to do, that I find I have to do with midlife women, is helping them to uplift themselves in terms of recognizing the talents, recognizing what they've overcome, recognizing what they have to contribute, and then articulating it in a way that it lands for the people hiring.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah, that's the two big areas.
It is a little tricky because, like, like I've gone through a lot of stuff in my life. You couldn't even get into it. But, most of it, it's like you're embarrassed to talk about it. And people, at one point, even in a business world, I tried to separate personal and business. And people are like, but I would want someone who's survived all of that on my side, and it's like, all right, now you make me feel a little better about it, but I get it where people are always like, I'm just not going to say, especially to how we were brought up. I was brought up in the day, kids are seen and not heard, you do what you do. So you didn't speak up, you didn't say what you wanted. It was just whatever you put in front of me is what I got. And that's, so teaching people that have a voice and stand up for yourself and fight for what you want, these are things that, aren't in everybody's blood, so helping them to navigate that is a huge accomplishment.
Yeah. And it comes back to the confidence building. So, I mean, obviously I've been doing this. I did this part-time for, 15 years, full-time for 5 years. Mm-hmm. I can usually tell quite quickly where the work needs to be. And sometimes I have women who know where their skills are. They know the direction they want to go, but they are struggling with the voice side of it. Mm-hmm. So then we zone mostly in on the confidence building activities. And it's not about just going straight to the HR people and saying, this is what I need. So for some women, I give them simple things, like some of the homework might be, okay, this week, you need to go have a coffee with 2 of your senior bosses. You need to ask them out for a coffee. And I'm like, you don't book the next session with me until you've done that. Right? And so then some of them try and then they come with an excuse. I go, no. Remember, we're doing small actions, and the small action is for you to be confident enough to go ask your manager, your senior manager, for a coffee. Just get to know the person. And a lot of them, when they start having that, they find that they're dealing with just another human being. Mm-hmm. This isn't some monster with 3 heads. This isn't some unreasonable being. Right. A lot of the time, the person hasn't helped them because they haven't known how to help them, because it's never been articulated.
Right.
And so sometimes we start small. It's a coffee. Yeah. Or whatever, or it's just a conversation, a greeting, by the water cooler or whatever. Yeah. But just having that, or even saying, hey, I'm going to get myself a coffee in the kitchen. Do you want me to get you one?
Right.
Like that's how you break the ice with some of the senior managers. Yeah. We start small. Usually by the time we finish, they become really good. I wouldn't say close friends with the bosses, but there's a relationship there. There's trust that's been built. And suddenly they realize that the person isn't an ogre, and that a lot of these male bosses are grateful when they're able to have the conversations with their midlife women employees, because they've got wives and girlfriends who are also going through this stuff. And it's probably safer for them to understand from that point of view first, and then take it home to their partners, So I've had women come back to me saying, oh, my bosses, he was so grateful. He's like, I've been trying to understand my wife, but if I ask the question, she gets really snappy or whatever, she becomes overly sensitive. Right. And so then suddenly he's speaking to another woman about it. He's like, oh, is that what happens? And is that why? And they're grateful for it. So don't be afraid to have the conversations.
Right. That's good advice. Now, you did a book. So your book on menopause, it offers advice on keeping sanity intact during tough times. So what inspired you to write the book, and what's the key message you want readers to take away from it?
Okay, so I wrote Internal Uprisings, the title of the book. I actually, to be honest, it came from a journal. So I've been a writer my whole life. I was writing and journaling through the hard days in South Africa. As a little kid, when I first realized what environment I was living in, I couldn't really understand it and process it. So I would write little stories about it. I would write poetry. So for me, writing is like a much loved companion, always helped me process things. And that's how I then ended up becoming really good at writing resumes and LinkedIn, because words for me has been my little, I suppose, solace is the word. So when I started going through menopause, I started to write about it because I didn't know what was happening to me. I was a reasonably well put together woman, and suddenly the brain fog is there, the insomnia is there, and I'm like, I am falling apart. I don't know what's happening. I'm crying all the time. I felt, and yes, there was the embarrassment around all of those symptoms, around not being able to have conversations. I was angry. So I started to write through it. And then when I started to do research, because I wanted to understand it deep, I always need to know how things work. So I started to do research. I started talking to other women and found I wasn't alone. It was my journal plus the research that formed the book. And I remember when I sent it off to an editor the very first time, she said something's missing in the book. And I was like, what? And she said, I don't know. She said, something deeper is missing. And she said, how did you come to write this? And I told her it was, I journaled. And she said, I'm going to ask something of you. She said, will you send me a couple of extracts from your journal, whatever you're comfortable sending? Because she said, I know it's very personal when you're writing in a journal. So I sent her a couple of extracts, and she said, that's what's missing. The authenticity of what you've written in your journal is what's missing from. She said, I can see it's a well-researched book, but she said you need, and so I ended up putting quite a bit of my journal into the book. So when people read it, they'll see that there's extracts directly from the journal with my state of mind. Now, I will say that was a terrifying thing to do because we're always afraid of being judged. And I certainly have been afraid of being judged. But I also realized that if I didn't really speak on that real deeper level that we go through, the emotional challenges, the mental, the spiritual challenges, then only half of the problem is spoken about. And so that's what the book is. And the key message around it, because through that, I came to ways of taking care of myself. Self-care becomes really important. So that is one of the key messages. Finding and owning your voice is probably the key message of the book, because I feel that for us midlife women, that is the most sacred time that we go through. We've birthed the children and raised them. We've been the partners and wives. We've taken care of the parents. We've supported the friends and the colleagues. This is our time. This is where suddenly we go, what about me? And now is the time to actually put yourself on the priority list and to go and find your path in the world. So I actually feel, for me, it certainly felt like menopause was the most sacred journey for me as a woman, not as a mother, not as a sister or a daughter, but me as a woman. And it really was where I found my voice. And that's why I'm very enthusiastic about helping other women find their voices and advocating for themselves and going to claim in life what is theirs.
Yeah. That's an amazing story, because it's true. It's not something people talk about. Even the doctors, they're just like, yeah, it's, on the checklist, suck it up, deal with it next. Nobody helps you to understand what's happening, what's going to happen, what to expect, what not. And no two people experience it the same. So whatever they read in a textbook doesn't mean that that's what's happening to me. And half the time it's just like, it's your fault. You're just tired. Or,
yes.
Eat better, whatever. Actually, they have an excuse for everything, but nobody's helping you understand what on earth is going on. I mean, and I think that's great.
Yeah. So, look, I found that I know it's helped. I've been on a number of podcasts with midlife that's focused on that menopausal journey now. And I was on one recently where there were some women that attended the Zoom. So it was like a presentation, and they asked questions. They asked me questions directly, and I have no problem answering authentically. I suppose the book is out there now, right? Whatever judgment's going to come is going to come. And part of me finding my voice is to not be afraid of a very personal journey that led to,
that's yours, yeah.
That led to success and to me now being able to do work that I really love doing,
Right.
Yes. Work that I really love doing and that I'm going to do for a long time, as long as, until the old bones start creaking and whatever.
That's still inspirational. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Now tell us, how do you guide your clients in overcoming the fear and uncertainty that often comes with a major career change in midlife?
So as I said, one of the first steps I do with people, so actually the foundational step I do with every client, and I do work with midlife men as well, but most of my clients now is directed towards the midlife women, but I do have some senior executives come and they're ready to make changes and so on. The foundational piece I do with every client is a process called mining your story. I actually have that worksheet on my website as a free resource, but I go through it in detail with my clients. And it's about identifying the patterns in life that where your talents have emerged naturally, where you can do something literally in your sleep. So we go through that exercise. We also go through an exercise of what have you overcome and how did you overcome? Because what we're trying to identify is the skills that you may not have seen as skills that can be sold to a potential employer, but you use those skills to overcome whatever challenge, whether it was a personal one, a professional one, whatever. And then we start looking at what does the ideal job look like? If you could wave the magic wand from Hogwarts and just wish for an ideal career, what does it look like? So we also go through identifying what that ideal career looks like without filtering. Don't filter, think in possibility.
Right.
And then also identify what are your dream companies, your top 10 or 15 dream companies. And once we go through that foundational piece of identifying all those things, then we start identifying the transferable skills. Okay, you may have been a doctor, for example, and you now want to work in health technology. So what are the transferable skills between the two? Mm-hmm. And from there, we start shaping up the resume different. We shape up your LinkedIn to be a strong brand story of where you want to head. Mm-hmm. And then if there's a cover letter required, we shape that up as well. And then with the interview coaching as well, we're starting to shape up answers. Like I do practices with my clients. Here's the questions. I give them the questions. I let them answer, and then I give them feedback. You spoke too long on that answer. You haven't covered, the strongest transferable skill in that answer. Because remember, you're going for a role that's completely different to what you've always done. And so it is a process, but what I've seen, I will say a lot of people try to avoid the foundations. That's, I think, across the board in life. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people want better health, but they want to avoid the first 4 small steps. Mm-hmm. They want the big gestures or the big, and I've always seen the success not last. When you don't get the foundations right, you don't build on solid ground. And so then the success might be fleeting. You might land that great job that pays you an extra $20,000, but in 2 years' time, you're back calling Wendy because you're dissatisfied. It didn't work out the way you want to. And so the mining your story is the foundational piece. I do it with everybody. And I encourage people to actually go through that process. Right. And I still do it on myself. Every end of year between Christmas, soon as Christmas, Boxing Day here in Australia, right, to the 31st of December, I actually take myself through that process over those few days. Right. Because goals change. We may have accomplished what we wanted to this year, and next year you want something different. I might want to go in a different direction or whatever, or I might want to, like this year, I took on writing business copy because I still love writing so much. Yeah. So that was another piece of work, but I identify these things and I go through it. Okay, what can I use as my transferable skills to sell, to businesses, small businesses and things like that. So I do it on myself yearly. It's now a routine. It's a tradition
Right.
to do it between Christmas and New Year's.
It's good. So you practice what you preach. It's, people can't see,
Yeah.
That's good. So now you turned your personal struggles into strengths that empower others. So what advice would you give to someone who feels stuck in their current career but's afraid to make a change?
So look, I think it's back to the foundational piece. Go and identify the strengths, but the best piece of advice I can give to someone is simply do one thing, whatever that one thing is. So if you're feeling stuck in your career, then maybe the first one thing you need to identify is why. Why am I stuck? Is it because I have a boss who is not supportive, who has never been supportive, and so I'm overlooked for promotions every time there's an opportunity to be promoted? Is it because I haven't undertaken any learning to grow in my career? Because we do need to consistently grow, especially in today's world. Technology is changing and emerging, and it's at the heart of all of our careers. You and I are talking on, we podcasters, but we look at us on technology, right? Using Zoom and so on. So, have I been upskilling, or am I consistently upskilling, or at least getting across what the main emerging tech is at the moment?
Right.
Am I, because some of the guys, this is going to some of the midlife guys, when they come, they have supported the family, put the kids through college, they bored. So their why is, I'm bored. I'm feeling stuck in my career because I'm bored. There's nothing that inspires, nothing that excites me. Okay. So maybe that's the first one thing you need to do. Then maybe the second step to do is to go, okay, I've done this first one thing. So the next one thing is, now I need to identify what skills I have. What are my because transferable skills are the skills that matter. Job-specific skills you can be trained in. But your transferable skills, like your leadership skills, your EQ skills, your problem-solving skills, your communication skills, your people-leading skills, all of those. So you need to start identifying those. These are going to be valuable in all of these industries, and most transferable skills are. And then, okay, what job-specific skills do I need to be able to do that job? Do I have it? No. Okay, where can I go learn about it? So get all of that preparation done first and do it slowly and get one win at a time, because when people get one win at a time, they're encouraged to keep moving forward. Right? But if you don't, if you try to go, oh my God, I've got to do these 15 things, and you try to do all of them and you don't get a win, then you become discouraged very quickly. So it's one small action step a day.
Right.
I do my one small action step 6 days a week. Sunday's rest day for me. Right. I like to Netflix, spend time with the family, go out for breakfast, all of it. Right. But 6 days a week, I'll go, okay, what is it that I need to do? And sometimes it's got nothing to do with my work. Sometimes my one action is in the area of health, right? I need to go for my 45-minute walk. I didn't do it yesterday. I need to do it today. I don't feel so energetic, whatever. But I think as long as you're moving forward with one action step a day, you're always moving forward.
Right. No, it's great advice.
And that helps you to become unstuck. Because if you sit and do nothing, you will never become unstuck. You'll remain in that little cycle. The moment you take one little action step forward, whatever that area, and then, give yourself the tick, the pat on the back for the fact that you did your 45-minute walk, or you sat down and made your little list of, okay, these are my 6 reasons why I'm feeling so stuck.
Right.
And look, honesty is very important here.
Yeah.
Don't try to sugarcoat your reasons or anything like that, because all reasons are valid, but you need to be honest about it, because once you identify them, you can actually work out an action plan to address them.
Yeah. Now, tell us, looking back at your journey, what's been the most rewarding part of helping midlife professionals and menopausal women achieve their career goals?
The most rewarding part is when I see women go from being tentative and reticent about their value and their skills and actually start to communicate it with confidence and get what they want. Because sometimes when women come to me, a lot of the time they're going through real struggles, physical struggles, not sleeping, insomnia, all these things. They also doubting themselves, they're lacking in confidence. So when I watch that journey change and see this woman quietly gain her confidence, and it's not necessarily women becoming rah-rah and noisy about everything. It's just finding a voice and speaking confidently and quietly about what you need and asking for what you need. And so when I see that happen, because, some of the women that I work with, I become friends with, because, when you're working on this journey and you're sharing very personal stories together, because I have no problem sharing my journey with the women I work with. I'm quite honest about it. A lot of them have bought the book. They're going to read about it anyway in the book, right? So I don't, like I say, look, okay, today you're not feeling so great. So maybe today is a do and a dive day, but you're only allowed to do and a dive for 1 or 2 days. After that, I'm checking in on you. I'm calling you in 48 hours to make sure you've come out from under the doona, because we do have to feel all our feelings. Avoiding the feelings is just probably the worst thing you can do for yourself. You never get to process it. You never get to feel it. All you do is suppress it, and then it bubbles up and explodes at some point. So for me, it's like everything is valid, and feeling down and feeling stuck and lacking in confidence, all of that is valid. Go do a dive with it if you need to, but then you need to emerge. And then we've got to put the action plan, and then we're going to take the one step, and it's all about the one step forward and the one step forward. What I see happen, though, is that when people take one step consistently, they do it, say, over 2 or 3 weeks, suddenly they're starting to take 2 or 3 steps at a time, because now they're looking after the health. They're looking after forming the communities with their other girlfriends, and then they're looking after taking that little step that they need to take around the career. So it's not always one step. It starts with one step, but as women gain confidence, it becomes 2 or 3 steps at a time. Everything compounds, and then the success starts to move quicker than they imagine.
Good. I mean, they get the momentum.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, anything you want to talk about that we didn't cover already?
No, I think we've spoken about all there is to talk about, and the message really is to have faith and belief in yourself,
right,
and to understand that you are worth taking that 1, 2, or 3 steps for.
Right. And where could people find your books? Are they on Amazon?
So the book is Internal Uprising. So if you go onto Amazon, you can just put in Internal Uprising and my name, Wendy Alexander, and it'll take you straight to the book. And then the work that I do, I'm at Happy Career Hub, is the name of my website. I'm also on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is actually where I do a lot of free videos. I post a lot of articles, lots of very practical tips and tricks.
Okay.
And my handle is Wendy A. Alexander. So I couldn't get Wendy Alexander. I had to put my middle initial in there. Wendy A. Alexander, LinkedIn.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, I'll include that on here. Well, thank you again for being on the show. Again, that was Wendy Alexander. Never miss an episode by subscribing. So thank you again.
It's wonderful. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Real Conversations with Patricia, talking with some of the most brilliant minds on their journey to success and their recommended strategies. Please leave your feedback and visit pristineadvisors.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Feel free to let me know your thoughts, suggestions, and anything else you'd like me to cover. Together, we can make success happen for all.